Not many universities have, 60 acres of land in the heart of the
Mhm.
campus.
So Central had an identity and then lost its identity and then regained an identity, and I think it's never really been a campus, and we've called it a campus, but I don't think it has been.
When Trinity College became Duke University in the 1920s, a chapel would grow to mark West Campus, and Trinity College's campus would become known as East. On a plot of land between the two campuses stood housing owned by Irwin Mills, where their workers lived.
So Duke owned East Campus, they owned West Campus, and then they owned Duke Forest, which stretches, as you know, into Orange County. There are houses along Old Irwin Road that were originally part of Duke Forest. They've sold off some parts of that land over time, but they did not own that space in the middle that was owned by Irwin Mills when the original campus was acquired.
In 1972, Duke's Board of Trustees approved a plan to create student housing on the land, and the university took out a $7 million loan to build it.
My understanding is that Central Campus was explicitly and intentionally built to house graduate and professional students.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a designated area of Central Campus that was for married students, also with children. And that dictated the design of the apartments, the placement of the apartments, the size of the apartments. But all of it was built with the intent that graduate and professional students would live there.
I think they were seeing the growth of the student population stretch their housing capacity. They had some married student housing off of Maureen Road, and because of some political pressures, they made the decision not to retain that housing. And so they needed additional housing for students and for married couples and families that were here. So that inspired them to look to Central Campus as an option.
The first students moved to Central in 1974. As Duke moved away from housing graduate students, Central Campus became home to more than 1,000 undergrads.
There were some families that reacted and said, we're being pushed out, why is this happening? I think there was more of a reaction from probably international students and the Divinity School. But Central Campus wasn't a particularly stable graduate and professional student area anyway. Stable meaning students would only stay there for a year or two and then leave, so there was a lot of turnover. Although there were some PhD students who stayed there for 6, 7, 8 years while they were here.
Yeah, I think Central has always been an integral part of student housing during those 14 years. Roughly 1,100 students have lived on Central. So that's a significant proportion of the upper class population.
After decades of housing mill workers and then students, administrators decided that Central could do more.
And then, I guess, early 2000s, up until 2008, Duke decided, we're going to make a whole new investment in Central Campus, and it's going to become the new campus. And I don't know if you've heard of the new campus or not, but there was a plan to make that into truly a campus. There was going to be a rec center, the arts were going to be represented there, there's going to be performance space, perhaps a theater, classroom space, and residential space. There was a whole plan for that to happen. Campus Drive was going to be redirected, it was going to move, and Campus Drive was going to become sort of closer to Central Campus, so that there was a road that went by Central, that it was on a main thoroughfare known as Campus Drive. And with the recession that occurred in 2008, that plan was backburnered pretty quickly.
Well, I've been here 18 years. I would say, starting about a decade ago, we, began to realize that the quality of that construction, the number of issues that were emerging, that we needed to start thinking seriously about retiring, and my guess is had the recessions of 2008, 2009 not had the kind of impact it had on institutional resources it might have happened a few years earlier. But I'd say it's been about a decade that we have been planning for it. Now, there's 1,000 beds, so you can't just shut it. We have to have alternatives, and it takes many years to both identify the resources and build the buildings. So it's been a 10-year planning process of both conceiving of the closure and ensuring that we had adequate bed space to compensate for the loss.
Like the ideas of what it should be used for, the students who live on Central have changed over the years. From graduate students to Greek life, Central's identity has shapeshifted as housing costs and assignments have changed.
This gradual shift of students began for Central Campus. So Central Campus began to become more of an undergraduate community. There was undergraduate encroachment over a number of years. Our enrollment went up a bit, and suddenly Central Campus was all undergrad, with the exception of the apartments at 301 Swift Avenue, which we maintained as graduate and professional student housing, primarily for international students, for 1 year. When the transition began to occur for undergraduates to move to Central Campus, it had a lower price point than the residence halls on East or West. And so what we found was that a lot of financial aid students were attracted to Central, as were a number of minority students who were attracted. And so Central had somewhat of an unusual identity in that it became a place where primarily our African American students felt very comfortable. Many of them expressed, and financial aid students, but expressed the fact that they had their own kitchen. They weren't tied to a large board plan or meal plan on campus. You really didn't need a car to live in an apartment setting like Central because you could use the bus. And so it took on an identity of a place where our minority students and our financial aid students were more inclined to prioritize as where they wanted to live. A decision was made, I don't remember when and I don't remember exactly how, that it didn't make sense for Central to have a lower price point. And so over time, Central became more equally leveled from a rent standpoint with East and West Campus rent rates. And then I guess in the last several years, it really took on a new identity when, I guess in the last 6 or 7 years, when the sororities indicated that they wanted housing on campus, and they demanded that the housing all be on the same campus. But we only had 2 choices, Central or West, and administratively the decision was made that it wouldn't be fair to take up that many beds on West Campus for all of the sororities. So the sororities then moved to Central Campus. It was determined that there should be other Greek life on Central as well. There should be a selective living group presence, and there should be an independent house presence. So Central sort of got caught up in this plan of moving from a quad model back to a house model. So Central's had some very interesting identities.
And that also changed the nature of Central. I think Central prior to that was kind of viewed as a quiet, almost sleepy place. And then when the selectives came out here, it really became invigorated in a different way.
I think the biggest and kind of ongoing issue has been a sense of community on Central Campus. Residents sometimes feel isolated from the rest of campus, and because there aren't as many sort of social options as there are on East and West Campus, like there isn't really a union over there, there isn't a student center, there isn't a library over there, that sometimes the students who are over there feel isolated. At other times, students have liked living over there because they felt for various reasons like they weren't as welcome on West Campus, or that West Campus housing had a lot of fraternities, and these were other groups that didn't feel comfortable. So I think that kind of the ongoing issue has been how to incorporate Central Campus residents with the life of East and West Campus so that they feel part of the whole campus.
So administrators began to look at how they could change it.
So there have been plans to do more with Central Campus since at least the 1990s, and wanting to put in additional retail options, wanting to have additional facilities like basketball courts and a pool, both of which went in the 1980s. So there's been an interest in developing it. The sort of new campus project from the mid to late 2000s was a lot about creating a more robust sort of corridor on Campus Drive between the two campuses. It was really the economic recession of 2008 that really put that on hold. I don't know a lot about how far the plans went, but my sense is that there was sort of in conceptual stages, sort of making general plans, but there weren't specific buildings being sketched out.
I think it stayed around because it's been convenient, it's been there, it has served the needs of some students, many students. Some students have liked that apartment style living. But I think it's been around because no one's really given serious consideration to how to replace it. And I think it's only been recently that the institution has recognized that Central Campus has really put a cramp in the residential model. It's not a campus. It's been difficult to create community over there. And I think it's been recognized that it would be much better for the entire residential system to really replace it with something else. That has come about, I think, also as a recognition that East Campus has worked fairly well, and once students leave East, their experience after that has not been as positive as many students would like for it to be. So I think we've just given much more deliberate and intentional thought to what should the sophomore, junior, and senior residential experience look like.
Now, however, Central is set to undergo a radical change. Mineta announced a student government meeting last school year that the campus would no longer house undergraduates as of the end of the spring 2019 semester.
300 Swift and 301 Swift will still be in operation. So, we'll have 500 students living up on Swift. So we have to be, provide all the appropriate transportation, food, all those things. So I don't want you to, we're not going to neglect the residents of Swift. We've already started planning another residence hall. That's already underway. We know we're going to bring another 500 students to West Campus when we close 300 Swift at some point. We've been very open about that 300 Swift is not our permanent solution. It's a temporary solution until we get the added beds here on West Campus. So there's more coming, and I think we're trying to be thoughtful that as we have more students here, we want to make sure all the support environment is there to accommodate it as well, and food in particular.
But what to do with the 60 acres in the middle of campus? The Board of Trustees launched a task force to decide what to do with the land.
We absolutely have to be in the graduate student housing business. Duke has not needed to provide graduate student housing in its previous history because the Durham and the Triangle had an abundance of affordable and adjacent housing. That's no longer the case. And the next need really is for Duke probably to invest in housing for graduate students that is affordable and accessible. That doesn't take up but 3 to 4 acres. You can build thousands of beds, in 3 or 4 acres of land. So there's a lot of land there, and I think in the long run, I actually think the trustees made the right decision to slow down and to create a trustee level task force. I mean, who's to know that 30 years from now there's not going to be an 11th or 12th or 13th school, in whatever field that Duke might get into. It's a real luxury to have 60 acres of land nearby, and I think it's appropriate to take the time to figure out what's the vision for Duke, not in the next 3 to 4 years, but in the next 20 to 30 years, and to be sure that you've preserved enough land mass to accommodate whatever that expansion may be. Pretty logical there may be some health encroachment from one end, and the gardens would love to expand one day, and who would object to that, and things like graduate student housing. But I think there are some needs that have just never even been identified that hopefully will come from this very thoughtful consideration by the trustees.
With the medical center on one side, the gardens on its edge, and Irwin Road buttressing it, Central could be used for a myriad of purposes. However, currently, its future remains uncertain.
So there have been a number of tweaks, I would say, to Central Campus, but no huge overhaul that the new campus was intended to provide. And now we're looking to bulldoze it.